Hey everyone, in my previous video, we spoke of a theory regarding the possible reason on why the Elven rope burned Gollum. The story was that of the Noldoran elves in Valinor, prior to the coming of elves in the First Age, so I thought today we could explore the sundering of the elves from the Undying Lands, marking their first return in Middle-earth. So where do we begin? Once upon a time in Arman, also known as the Undying Lands, a talented elven blacksmith known as Fëanor crafted white gems known as Silmarillions. They were among the most prized of all the wonders crafted by the elves, and were coveted by many. The jewels were made from the light of the land of the Valar, which was extracted from the two trees of Valinor, Lodolin, the gold tree, and Teleprion, the silver tree. These trees were significant in that they were the first source of light, with exception to starlight, and the two trees, also known as the lamps of Arman, were created before the sun and the moon. The trees represented the light of Valinor, and as a vassal for the Valar. Melkor, who was originally not only one of the Valar, but considered the greatest of the Valar, turned against his creator Ilúvatar. Melkor yearned to extract his revenge on Ilúvatar and the Valar for exiling him from their blessed realm, who did so due to his wickedness. Melkor travelled south to Avathar and discovered Ungoliant, a primordial spirit who took the form of a giant spider, and quickly secured her as an ally to accomplish his revenge against the Valar and the elves who were Ilúvatar's favourite children. To be clear, Ungoliant would make Shelob look like a spiderling. He told her of his plans, which would rock Arman to its core. Ungoliant was afraid of the wrath of the Valar. However, she was seduced by Melkor, who promised to sate her immeasurable hunger with whatever she desired, if she would aid him. And she agreed. The plan was to destroy the two trees of Valinor and for Ungoliant to drink their light, which was a delightful treat for the creature in itself. The consequences of their errand would leave Valinor in darkness. Melkor destroyed the two trees, and Ungoliant began to drink the sap out of them, which gushed out like blood, and she injected her lethal poison into them. Ungoliant grew quickly, and she was now vaster and more hideous than ever. After their mission was complete, Melkor and Ungoliant travelled to the northern city of Fëanor, which was the home to the house of Fëanor, although Fëanor had been away from Fëanor, which he was exiled to due to past transgressions from the troublesome elf. That is a long story in itself, so it's a video I can make in the future. Melkor and Ungoliant arrived in Fëanor, and all the residents, aside from the king Finwë, fled in terror. Finwë, father of Fëanor, was the only elf to withstand the horror of the darkness. Melkor broke into the stronghold and took all the jewels that the Noldor had hoarded, including the Silmarils, slaying the Noldoran king Finwë in the process. The Valar quickly realized the destruction of the trees, and that with the trees dead, their light survived only in the Silmarils. In order to restore the trees and foil Melkor's wickedness, Yavanna, a Valar, asked Fëanor to give up the Silmarils so that they could be broken and the essence which contained the light of the two trees within them released. However, Fëanor adamantly stated that he would not give up his Silmarils of his own free will, and proclaimed that if the Valar forced him to do so, that they would be no better than Melkor. Ultimately, however, Fëanor's selfishness made little difference, for a messenger from Fëanor then arrived to deliver the news of Finwë's death and the loss of the Silmarils. Upon his return to Fëanor, Fëanor was furious at Melkor, who he knew murdered his father and stolen the Silmarils which he long lusted for. The white gems which possessed the light of the two trees were now in the Dark Lord's possession. Fëanor hence named Melkor Morgoth, meaning black foe or dark tyrant. which he would be forever remembered throughout the history of Arda. In their departure, the pure gems burnt the Dark Lord's hands black forever, for he was not pure. Whence Morgoth returned to Middle-earth with Ungoliant via the ice wasteland of Helcarax. He thus set the gems upon his crown in his fortress of Angband, and declared himself King of all the world. Fëanor's banishment in Formenos was not yet lifted by the Valar, although he rebelled in his anger to them, since he believed that if he had not been invited away from Formenos at their behest, that he could have prevented his father's death. And since he was the eldest son of Finwë, he returned immediately to his home city and claimed lordship over Noldor, calling all his kin to come forth to the high court of the king. A great multitude of elves had gathered swiftly to hear what he would say. Fëanor was a master of words, and he presented a speech to his kin so passionate that he won over their hearts. The Noldor would forever remember his words, which were filled with great anger and pride. The Noldor stirred with madness after his words. Fëanor's wrath and his hate were given most to Morgoth. The now king of the Noldor was distraught with grief from the slaying of his father and with the anguish over the theft of the Silmarils. In his passionate speech, he urged the Noldor to follow him in departing the blessed land for Middle-earth, and they obliged. Many of the elves, including Galadriel, were eager to leave Arman. The elf lord echoed the deceitful words of Melkor to his kin, which were that the elves could rule as they wished in Middle-earth without the Valar. Like Melkor, who once spoke of sundering Arman to deceive Fëanor in his plan to possess the Silmarils, Fëanor too echoed these words to his followers for his own selfish purpose in waging war with Morgoth and reclaiming the Silmarils for himself. An elf named Fingolfin, who had a large following of elves since he was Fëanor's half-brother, and since Fëanor had been banished from Noldor, he was next in line to be king. He himself did not wish to depart from Arman. However, he was urged by his son Fingon to march with Fëanor. Ultimately, Fingolfin, who was loyal to Fëanor, having himself not disputed Fëanor's claim to lordship, and previously claimed that they were half-brothers in blood and full brothers in heart, decided to travel to Middle-earth. Fingolfin did not wish to be sundered from his people, who desired to leave, nor leave them to the rash counsel of their king. So it was that Noldor prepared to travel to Middle-earth. Fëanor recognized that the elven companies needed ships. However, they had none. It would take too long a time and toil to build so great a fleet, even if there were many within the Noldor skilled in such a craft. He therefore resolved to persuade the Teleri elves, who were known for their craft in shipmaking and were longtime friends of the Noldor, to join them in their rebellion, believing that his powerful war on Morgoth would be increased if the Teleri joined them on their voyage. Once the Noldor arrived to the borders of Arman in Alqualondë and told the Teleri of their plan, the Sea Elves grieved for their friends. However, the Teleri could not be convinced in aiding their Noldoran kin. Olwe, the Lord of the Teleri, did not wish to anger the Valar in the Noldor's rebellion against them. No ship would they lend, nor help in the building. This made Fëanor grow wrathful, for he did not wish to delay. "You renounce your friendship, even in the hour of our need," he said. "Yet, you were glad indeed to receive our aid when ye came at last to these shores, faint-hearted loiterers, and well-nigh empty-handed in huts on the beach would you be dwelling still, had not the Noldor carved out your haven and toiled upon your walls." Fëanor stated to insult Olwe. But Olwe answered, "We renounce no friendship, but it may be the part of a friend to rebuke a friend's folly. And when the Noldor welcomed us and gave us aid, otherwise than you spoke in the land of Arman, we were to dwell forever as brothers whose house stands side by side." But as for our white ships, those you gave us not, we learnt not that craft from the Noldor, but from the lords of the sea, and the white timbers we wrought with own hands, and the white sails were woven by our wives and daughters. Therefore, we would not give them, nor sell them for any league or friendship. For I say to you, Fëanor, son of Finwë, these are to us as are the gems of the Noldor, the work of our hearts, whose like we shall not make again. Fëanor sat in dark thought until his host was assembled. When he judged that their strength was enough, he went to the haven of the swans and began to man the ships that were anchored there, attempting to take them away by force. But the Teleri withstood him and cast many of the Noldor into the sea. Then swords were drawn, and a bitter fight was fought upon the ships and about the lamplit quays and piers of the haven, and even upon the great arch of its gates. 3 times the people of Fëanor were driven back, and many were slain upon either side. But the vanguard of the Noldor were secured by Fingon, with the foremost of the host of Fingolfin, who came up and found the battle, and their secondary army joined when they saw the sight of their own kin failing, and rushed in before they knew rightly the cause of the quarrel. Some thought that the Teleri had sought to waylay the march of the Noldor at the bidding of the Valar. Thus, the Teleri elves were defeated, and their boats taken. The Noldor who had won the battle suddenly beheld a dark figure standing high upon a rock. They heard a loud voice, solemn and terrible. Then all halted and stood still, and from end to end of the host, the voice was heard, speaking the curse and prophecy, which is called the prophecy of the North, and the doom of the Noldor. Much it foretold in dark words, which the Noldor understood not, until the words indeed after befell them. But all heard the curse that was uttered upon those that would not stay nor seek the doom and pardon of the Valar. Tears unnumbered ye shall shed, and the Valar will fence Valinor against you, and shut you out, so that not even the echo of your lamentation shall pass over the mountains. On the house of Fëanor, the wrath of the Valar lieth from the west unto the uttermost east, and upon all that will follow them it shall be laid also. The oath shall drive them, and yet betray them, and ever snatch away the very treasures that they have sworn to pursue. To evil end shall all things turn, that they begin well, and by treason of kin unto kin, and the fear of treason, shall this come to pass. The dispossessed shall they be forever. The message of the Valar continued. Ye have spilled the blood of your kindred unrighteously, and have stained the land of Arman. For blood ye shall render blood, and beyond Arman ye shall dwell in death's shadow. The Valar have spoken. In that hour, Finarfin, the youngest brother of Fëanor, forsook the march, and returned to the Valar, and pleaded for forgiveness. Since the Noldor had travelled in groups, and he had led the last of the groups and joined the battle without true context, he and his followers received pardon from the Valar. Finarfin was the father of Galadriel, who despite the warning of the Valar, chose to continue with their uncles Fingolfin and Fëanor in travelling to Middle-earth. Fëanor halted and debated the course which the elves should take. Those that followed Fingolfin began to murmur and regret their decision of following Fëanor on the cursed road of Arman, which was a deserted, mountainous, and frozen land, since it neighboured Helcarax. They had lost some of the white Teleri ships on the road, and the remaining fleet was not enough to transport the entire company of the large host across the narrow shores into Middle-earth. None of the elves were willing to abide in the freezing climate, while some of the company travelled via the ships. Treason was on all of their minds, just as the messenger of the Valar had stated. A gushing wind running west to east appeared. Fëanor saw his chance, and he and his sons called all those that were loyal to him, and without counsel from Fingolfin, they departed with the ships in secrecy, leaving Fingolfin's company alone in Araman. They arrived at Losgard in the land of Lamoth, in the far west of Beleriand, where Morgoth and Ungoliant had passed not long before. When they landed, his eldest son Maedhros asked which sailors would they spare to sail back and retrieve the remaining elves. Fëanor laughed at the remark and proceeded to burn the ships, so his treachery was evident. Indeed, the prophecy of the Valar was quickly fulfilled. The earth being flat in those days allowed the remaining Noldor to see the flames, and they perceived that they were betrayed. Fingolfin now had the choice of either returning to Arman in disgrace or proceeding to Middle-earth across the treacherous road of Helcarax. Fingolfin and his people chose to attempt the crossing, as many of Fingolfin's hosts wished to continue, and many, including Fingolfin himself, was eager to confront Fëanor and his people over their betrayal. The journey was a long and terrible one, and Fingolfin's host suffered great losses along the way, which added to the bitterness that they felt for Fëanor and his sons. Fëanor would never witness the kin he left to die in Araman again. He passed away at the hands of a Balrog, which is another story for another time that I will cover. His son Maedhros became High King of Noldor. Maedhros, however, soon met Fingolfin when his company eventually arrived in Middle-earth, and gave the kingship to Fingolfin out of respect, for his desire was to keep his people united, and he acknowledged that, as Finwë's oldest surviving son, the kingship ought to pass to him. I hope you enjoyed the story of the kinslaying at Alqualondë. If you did, be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell button to stay up to date with more Lord of the Rings content. I hope you have a good day wherever you are, and as always, my Middle-earth friends, Hanalei for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode of Lord of the Rings Theory.
Embrace the power of the ring, or embrace your own destruction.
Renewed shall be blade.